Great, thanks, Kat.
All right. I think we can probably get ourselves started. I'll turn it over to Dan to do a quick introduction.
Great. Thanks so much, Kat. And my appreciation to everyone for joining this first Drought Task Force. Really want to thank all the agency leads for participating. I especially want to give a shout out to some of the CDBCB folks like Kat Weiss-Miller, Sam Stein, Emily Aldred, Janet Batston. I see Jason Ullman and his team as well. But everyone from the state for coming together. I'm Dan Gibbs. I'm the head of the Department of Natural Resources, and I'll have a little more updates a little bit later. But first, I want to introduce you all to Governor Polis. Governor Polis is right now in the Eastern Plains, and he's a numbers person. And the numbers really don't lie right now. When you look at some of the warmest temperatures ever recorded, you have the worst snowpack, and I'm really grateful for his leadership to enact this Drought Task Force for the second time. The first time was in 2020. But Governor, let me turn it over to you, and we're so grateful that you can join us to help kick this meeting off.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you to everyone who's on the Drought Task Force. This is an incredibly important part of our statewide response and making sure that we use every tool at our disposal to help every community across the state in need in this really difficult time. This year's snowpack, 21% of the average, and that's a 46-year low. And you're going to do a deeper dive into the stats and look at some of the regionalization and context after this, but at a high level, that should really get all of our attention. And is a big reason that we're coming together with a data-driven approach, learning lessons from the past, doing what we can to protect the future. We're taking this winter's record low precipitation and record high temperatures very seriously. I made the decision to activate this group very early so we could hit the ground running, do everything we can to address the different challenges that come in different parts of our state with this intense drought. And this group is really a big part of helping to chart that roll forward. I know that the strong team will share expertise and insight and experience to manage this challenge as effectively as possible. The Colorado way, working together, innovating, protecting the Colorado we love. And I just want to, on behalf of the state, thank each and every one of you for dedicating your time and talents towards this incredibly important work. Back to you, Dan.
Great. Thanks again, Governor, for joining us. We really appreciate your time as you're out on the Eastern Plains, definitely seeing firsthand some of the drought challenges in that part of the state. So let me turn it back over to Kat to help lead the discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Governor Polis, for joining us today. Welcome to the first Drought Task Force meeting of 2026. As you all know, the Drought Task Force was activated on March 16th by Governor Polis, and that came with the recommendation from the Water Conditions Monitoring Committee, which meets monthly and tracks conditions across the state. I'm Kat Weiss-Miller. I'm the section chief for water supply planning at the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and I'm really, happy and also feeling a little conflicted to convene you all today. But I want to just share a little bit about the Colorado Water Conservation Board. We're charged with conserving, developing, and protecting and managing Colorado's water for present and future generations. And along with the DNR, we help lead the Drought Task Force. So again, thank you all for being here. I'm going to turn it over briefly to the Russ Schumacher. But before I do that, I'm going to have us go through a quick round of introductions. Dan, you already spoke, but we can start off with you from DNR. We'll go through the whole group of Drought Task Force directors or proxies on this call. Please only speak up if you're a director or proxy, and we'll go through that quickly, but there will be some time to speak a little bit later during our director's reports. So Dan, go
Great.
ahead.
Yeah, Dan Gibbs, Executive Director of the Department of Natural Resources.
And CPW?
Yes, hello. Matt Nickel, I'm the Assistant Director for Aquatics branch, and I'm here as a proxy for Director Clowen.
Thanks, Matt. And Division of Water Resources?
Hi, I'm Jason Ullman, State Engineer and Director of the Division of Water Resources.
And then CWCB? Lauren, I think you're muted.
Hi, I'm Lauren Riss. I'm the director of the CWCB. Thanks, Kat.
Colorado Department of Agriculture?
Hi, Kat. I'm Robert Sakata, Senior Advisor to the Commission, proxy for our Commissioner of Ag, Kate Greenberg.
And Department of Local Affairs?
Good afternoon. My name's Ann Miller. I'm the director of the Colorado Resiliency Office in the Department of Local Affairs, and I'm a proxy for Director Maria DeCamera.
Thanks, Ann. And Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management?
Good morning, Chris Sorensen. I'm the Colorado State Emergency Operations Center Manager here on behalf of Director Kevin Klein.
Great, thank you. And I think we also have some supporting staff from several different agencies. I do want to highlight that we have Stacey Coleman from DNR. She works as DNR's tribal liaison as well. So with that, I'm going to jump ahead and quickly walk through our agenda. Next slide, please. All right. So as I said, first we'll hear from Russ Schumacher with a 10-minute overview of current water conditions. Then I will give a short overview of the Drought Response Plan and the Drought Task Force's role. After that, we'll have some time for director updates, about 20 minutes total. I'd like you to try to touch on what resources and staff capacity you have available, any key issues that you're seeing on the ground, comments and things that you are hearing from the public, and then any ideas you have for actions to move forward from today. We will come back to those ideas in the next steps. And we'll wrap with a short discussion on next steps and leave some time for public comment, although I think to my knowledge, we have not had any registered public comments for today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Russ.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Kat. Thanks, everyone, for the invitation to be here. I know many of you on the call, but for those I don't, my name is Russ Schumacher. I am the state climatologist and a professor in atmospheric science up at CSU, and I'll give a quick rundown of the drought conditions right now. So you can go to the next slide. So this is not a surprise probably to any of you, but it's always a good place to start to just remind ourselves that our mountains in Colorado get a lot of snow each winter, at least in a typical winter. On average, that's 40 to 50 inches of liquid in the highest elevations in the various mountain ranges, and hundreds of inches of snow. The map on the right is like inches of snowfall. Those white areas are more than 400 inches of snow in an average year. But we know that this year has not been anywhere close to an average year. We can go to the next slide. And this shows where we stand. I think probably everyone on the call has been looking at this graph each day and not liking what they see over the course of the whole winter. So if you're not familiar with these, the green line in the middle is the average snowpack, the average buildup of snowpack, and specifically snow water equivalent, the amount of liquid in that snow in our mountains averaged over 115 automated snow tell sites up in the mountains. The red line near the bottom is the previous lowest year on record, and the black line is what we've seen this year. And so you see up through early March, we were tracking on basically around record low through that time. And then we hit the heat wave in the second half of March, and you see the snow melting out extremely rapidly, such that as of April 1st, we were far, far less than half of the previous lowest year as of April 1st. The peak was about half of average and about a month early. As of, well, here it says 22% as of yesterday of the median. And then today it's 21%, as the governor mentioned, with, more warmth that we've had the last few days. So you can go to the next slide. We can then look back even further. So the SNOTEL network was established in the late 70s, early 80s. We know there were two really bad snow years in 1977 and 1981. We can compare to those with the data here from manual snow course measurements. So these are folks from the US Department of Agriculture and other agencies that go out and make, dig snow pits and make manual measurements of the snow and how much water there is in the snow on the first of each month through the winter. These are the April 1st numbers for 35 of these snow courses with data going back to at least 1950. Many of them go back even further than that. You can see those bad years of 1977 and 81. This is as a percent of the recent average. 2012 was also a terrible snowpack year. And then we see this year at the far right-hand side, far below any of those previous years in terms of April 1st snowpack. So far below even some of those really bad years in the past. Next slide. And then also it's been extremely warm. So it's been dry and it's been extremely warm, and that combination is not good for the snowpack. If you're not familiar with these graphs, basically it shows every water year here for the first 6 months. If you're up in the upper left corner, that's the bad part. That's the warm and dry. So the vertical axis here is temperature. The horizontal axis is precipitation. So the upper left quadrant is the drought quadrant, warm and dry. We see the first 6 months for the first 6 months of water year 2026 is shown with the star, far above any of even those really bad drought years of the distant past, like 1934, or more recently, like 2018. It's not the driest on record, but it's by far the warmest, 3 degrees warmer than any previous October through March period. So that is creating challenges in addition to the lack of precipitation. Next slide. So what does this mean? Well, it means we're missing a lot of water that we would normally have in that mountain snowpack. The table on the right is from the NOAA Colorado Basin River Forecast Center from their April 1st update. The middle column is the percent of normal. And so at the top, the top one is probably the most concerning because it's the whole basin, the whole upper Colorado River basin. So inflow into Lake Powell projected to be 22% of the recent median. And then you look at some of the rivers within Colorado, like in the Colorado headwaters or in southwestern Colorado, and they're all in that 30 to 40% of average range. So that is a huge amount of water that we normally get each year, and that is not there this year. So if this current forecast is correct, the flows into Lake Powell would be just slightly above 1977 and 2002, but that assumes average weather for the next few months. And so if it remains dry, then there's a pretty good chance it could be even lower than those terrible years of the past. Next slide. And so we can look at the US Drought Monitor. This is the map from this week. We see that over 95% of the state in drought conditions of D1 or worse, almost half the state in D3 extreme drought or worse. And so some of this is a reflection of the record low snowpack that we've been discussing. Some of this goes back to the very dry conditions last summer, especially in northwestern Colorado, and then factoring in the warmth and and I think the conditions continue to get worse on the eastern plains as well, and so. Not a great position to be in as of early April in terms of the drought monitor. Go to the next slide. Looking forward, where are we headed? This is NOAA's outlook for the April, May, June period. These outlooks are a few weeks old now. The new ones will come out next week. But for the next few months, what we see is at least a slight tilt towards drier than average, increased odds of drier than average across much of the West through June. You go to the next slide. Looking out a little bit farther, there is some reason for optimism as we get into the monsoon season later in the summer and then out beyond that. So this is showing a tilt towards wetter than average conditions in the southwestern US in the July, August, September period. That's when we have the monsoon, typically when those thunderstorms tend to pick up. And that's essentially what this map is showing, is the indications are that the monsoon season may be active. So there may be some relief on the way farther out in the future, but I think the next couple of months are gonna hurt before we get to that point. Go to the next slide. And then further out, the further reason I think for optimism in the longer run is that La Nina is over now. We will likely head into El Nino later this year, maybe not that long into the future. The El Nino may be strong. El Nino in the fall tends to be pretty wet in Colorado. Summers in El Nino, I don't know if it'll get here by then, but summers in El Nino tend to be on the wet side. So I don't think we're in for like many more months of record dry conditions. But we have the rough situation that we're in right now before we get to that sort of relief. So next slide, I think, is just the final takeaways. So water year so far, by far the warmest on record. March, I didn't really even get into all the records from March, but there were many. It's been dry since the big rain back in October. Mountain snowpack, the lowest on record for early April by a large margin. So I think we have to expect significant drought impacts in the next few months, but maybe some reason for optimism out late summer into fall and hopefully next winter. And then I think the last slide is just how to get in touch with me. As Kat mentioned, the Water Conditions Monitoring Committee meeting will come up, and that'll be a deeper dive. And those are each month. That'll be a deeper dive into some of these if you're able to join that. There's how to contact me. If you don't get our monthly summaries, there's the links to sign up. And I will stop there and see if there's any questions that I can answer at this point.
I don't think I'm seeing any questions, but feel free to raise a hand if you have one. Russ, that was really helpful, and obviously conditions have worsened since we moved towards activation of this task force, but it's nice to hear that there could be some hope on the horizon for us.
We'll hope. It's
right.
The seasonal outlooks are always uncertain, and especially the farther out you go. But we'll keep our fingers crossed that it heads that way in the coming months.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it. I know that you had to step away from something to be here, so thank you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Was that you? Director Scott?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Russ, thanks so much. And also thanks for posting all this stuff on the Climate Center's website. As we're trying to prepare our farmers and ranchers across the state, because, they're already starting to make decisions about planning. It's great to be able to share that information so they can hopefully make some informed decisions. So great website, and thanks for all that you do.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. And if there's specific information that folks need, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here as a resource.
All right. Well, with that, I think we can move on to our next agenda item, which is walking through the Drought Response Plan and the Drought Task Force's role and authority. Again, I'm Kat Weissmiller. I'm the Section Chief for Water Supply Planning at the Colorado Water Conservation Board. Emily Adrid and Sam Stein and Jenna Batson are all online with us too. They're all in the water supply planning section and can also help us answer some questions if any come up as we go. At a high level, though, this group is really about coordination and communication. We're here to really stay aligned on understanding the current conditions. We're here to share information across agencies, coordinate with partners and stakeholders, and elevate the impacts that we're seeing on the ground to decision makers and to the governor when needed. So that's where I'm going to start it off. Next slide, please. Some background on Colorado's drought response. The Drought Response Plan now lives within the Colorado Enhanced State Hazard Mitigation Plan. That was updated in 2023, and it gets updated every 5 years. Prior to that, it was a standalone plan that was established in 2018. And so that last plan was in place during the last drought that lasted through 2020 and 2021. And we were activated as a task force into 2022. The drought response plan was brought into the state hazard mitigation plan to align with other hazard response plans and streamline everything into one resource. Next slide. So in Colorado, as you've already heard, we have a proactive water supply monitoring framework in the Water Conditions Monitoring Committee. We proactively track water supply indicators on a monthly basis, and those meetings are open to the public, and we highly encourage you to attend just to keep up to speed on how conditions are looking and what the indicators are looking like. When indicators begin showing that drought could occur, the state begins moving into drought response. Next slide. Colorado has 3 phases of drought response, and that's based on a number of different things. Primarily a range of indicators: snowpack, precipitation, several different drought indices, including the Palmer Drought Severity Index, the Surface Water Supply Index, the Standard Precipitation Index, and we also track the number of counties in various drought stages according to the Drought Monitor. Next slide, please. So as you know, we are currently in phase 2, and that activates the Drought Task Force. The Drought Task Force is, this whole group, this interagency information sharing group. There's 3 different phases that start with phase 1, which is really increased monitoring. And then going to phase 3 would be a formal drought declaration and a formal proclamation of drought emergency from the governor. Next slide, please. I think we all know this, but I'm just going to go through it briefly for background. The Drought Task Force membership includes 2 lead departments, the Department of Natural Resources and the Colorado Water Conservation Board. It also includes the Division of Water Resources, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, as well as the Colorado Department of Agriculture, the Department of Local Affairs, and the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. And this group has been under different names and different kind of titles, but it's been activated numerous times in previous droughts, including in April 2002, May of 2011, May of 2018, and June of 2020 for various amounts of time. The last activation lasted about 15, we had 15 meetings, but the Drought Task Force was activated from June of 2020 into 2022. Next slide, please. The objectives of the Drought Task Force are really interagency information sharing. It brings together state leaders to assess drought conditions and elevate local, regional, and sector-specific impacts of drought. The powers that we have as the Drought Task Force are that we can convene time-bound, task-oriented ad hoc work groups to evaluate and address specific topics of interest to inform potential response or recovery efforts. So this is a really important piece of the drought response plan. We can also coordinate with the governor's office, who may seek federal assistance if they so choose, and we can make recommendations regarding drought declarations to the governor based on needs and conditions. So we really sit in the center between impacts and conditions review and elevating those conditions and recommendations to the governor. Next slide, please. A few sideboards on what the Drought Task Force is and is not. So we're not a regulatory body. I think most of you know that. The Drought Task Force does not have the authority to impose local watering restrictions. That really happens at the local level based on their supplies. The Drought Task Force doesn't really have authority to release emergency response funding directly. Partner agencies can offer existing drought mitigation funding or grants. We can also recommend the governor start the process of making funding available. And federal drought relief programs are available through the USDA Farm Service Agency Disaster Assistance Programs. And on that note, I'd like to share that I believe it was on the 7th that the USDA made a secretarial drought disaster designation, which opened up some resource availability. Okay, and then the Drought Task Force membership is really defined both in the state hazard mitigation plan and also through any additions that the governor makes. But it's predominantly limited to state agency representation. Next slide, please. I wanted to provide just a little bit of context to this group on what the Drought Task Force has done in the past so that you all can have some understanding of potentially what we might choose to do with this group going forward. So in the 2020 to 2022 group drought, the group met about 15 times. They also stood up the municipal and agricultural impact task forces and ultimately recommended moving into a phase 3 declaration that led to a drought emergency declaration in 2021 that covered 40 counties. The Drought Task Force also identified some of the hardest hit regions and sectors and showcased needs in these areas to better prioritize them for other emergency support. And the Drought Task Force also utilized agency staff, CWCB, CDA, DOLA staff, and others to coordinate resources for drought tours, stakeholder engagement websites, and they collaborated on a variety of different response resources. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to share a couple of drought work examples that came out of the Drought Task Force. The first being the Northwest Colorado Drought Tour, which happened in August of 2021. And I know several of you were either participated or heard about it. The Drought Task Force helped engage in the planning for that. That was a tour in Northwest Colorado to hear directly from producers, water managers, and local leaders about drought impacts, predominantly in the Yampa River Basin. The agricultural impacts at that time were very severe. So the drought tour kind of visited ranchers and producers who had to sell off herds for lack of forage and high feed costs and a range of other, really severe conditions, and brought decision makers and legislators to those producers and ranchers and helped to share those stories and really highlight issues. Additionally, in 2020, we put out the Municipal Water Provider Drought Plan guidance at CWCB, and that got some feedback and input from the Drought Task Force at the time. That plan guidance is really an effort aimed to recommend drought mitigation and response planning steps for local communities. And we also created a Colorado Drought Stories interactive story map. And that was really just a communication tool to help policymakers and the public understand drought impacts and really help inform decision making. And it was interactive and allowed producers to submit stories about what was happening on the ground. So I wanted to share a few of those examples so that this group could understand where we might go. Under our new drought plan, we have a lot more flexibility to address different kinds of ad hoc work groups. And I wanted to give you guys some ideas of where we could go with that. So with that context, I think we can transition into director's reports unless there are any questions. All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I believe Director Sakata said he had some slides to share. So maybe we can start off with you, Director Sakata.
Great, thank you. Great, well, thanks, Kat. So really to address the questions that you had presented to us, available resources. So we convened our senior management team, the divisions got together, and first off, the one thing we wanted to highlight was really our staff safety. We have inspectors out in the field and we want to make sure that they're safe. And number one, too, is training them to be careful because we really don't want them to be the source of ignition for a wildfire or anything. So that's our number one priority right now as we move forward. We have Dan Frazen, who's our ag emergency response person on board. If there are wildfires that are in existence, whether it's for livestock or animal operations, we want to be prepared to really assist in any way that we can. There's really only 2 grant programs that we have at the department that we think we might be able to restructure for drought response, but we're just now initial phase taking a look at that to see what we can do. And then just on the other side of that is just program support. I can't emphasize enough that the stress that farmers and ranchers are going to be under this year. And so our ag behavioral health program is really gearing up to be out there in the rural communities and to help communities be proactive right now and get some behavioral health support out there already. We have our soil health program, our noxious weeds program, and then we have a program that some people really don't know about, and that's our ag mediation program. So if farmers and ranchers find themselves in a conflict with whether it's a loan officer, whether it's a water agency, if they can't seem to get over the hump, they can engage us to help us mediate in some of that negotiations. Of course, the key topics to highlight is the huge impact to irrigated farmers. And, you know, our farming operation, the ditches that we're under are already going into sections, which normally doesn't happen till the middle of June. And so we're totally dependent on our farm for direct flow water rights. We don't have any storage rights at all. So it's for irrigated farmers, the impact is really real, and why I feel like we really need to move so quickly, so that farmers that may have the possibility of engaging in these prevent plant or programs can do that right away. Of course, that leads to impacts to ag workforce and the industries that depend on that, whether it's other animal operations that are depending on that feed that farmers or other farmers grow, you know, our dairy industry, all of those will be impacted. And then impacts on our surrounding states because of the resources we provide to them. And then also wildfire risk. We had a meeting yesterday and we were talking about how maybe we should be really reaching out to our ag community for wildfire risk mitigation practices on the farm, something that I don't know whether a lot of farmers really consider. Currently, observations from the public is just really the desire for information. I've gotten a lot of personal calls from farmers across the state going, what's this task force? What's going to go on? What's happening with that? And then also, and I think this is perfect, a central role, Kat, which what you described we're going to be doing is really collaborating on our efforts, is that we want to all help, and yet if we're all out there doing different things, farmers and ranchers only have a limited amount of time. And so we really want those meetings or those sessions to be productive for them. And I think if we can collaborate on those efforts, that's going to be really, really important. So next steps for us is we're already working on what we're calling a cooperator meeting, getting together, like you said, Kat, with USDA, with FSA, other state partners, ag organizations, water entities, conservation districts across the state, and really want to engage Colorado State University. They're already doing some local county extension office meetings out there. And I think, again, if we could collaborate on all those efforts, it'd be really helpful for the ag community. Setting up our own specific drought webpage and just developing an overall communications plan, I think, which we've already started to coordinate with CWCB on. So we're really appreciative of those efforts. So I think that's it for me, Kat. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Robert. That was a great update. With that, maybe I'll turn it over to Dan at DNR.
Great. Thanks, Kat. A few updates for me. As I think many of you know, the DNR holds the unique charge to balance the development and preservation of Colorado's resources, a mission that's become really critical and challenging under the pressures of growth and climate change that we have before us. As you've heard from the governor, the entire state is really at a high alert for the impacts of the drought on our communities and environment, our agriculture producers, municipal water managers, firefighters, recreational industries, aquatic species are all severely impacted. And the DNR and all of our divisions really play a really important role with this. The DNR, we have 8 different divisions that manage land, water, wildlife, extractive industries, and other programs. But particularly looking at drought response, our Colorado Parks and Wildlife, now under the leadership of Laura Clolin, manages our state parks and wildlife, our water divisions and water conservation board, and the Division of Water Resources plan for water use and administer water rights across the state. And then finally, within the executive director's office of my shop, we have a few special programs that are also related to drought. That includes the Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program, our Colorado River Program, and the Colorado Produce Water Consortium. They all have expertise to offer on this issue. Our state climatologist, Russ Schumacher, is awesome to hear his perspectives and see the slides of the dire conditions. So I'm not going to go over any more statistics on that. But we all know that what we have before us is very challenging. Personally, I live at almost 10,000 feet elevation in Summit County in Breckenridge, and I can go trail running on the trails right outside my house with no snow, which I've never ever seen that happen in all my 24 plus years of living in this community. And with no major relief on the horizon, these challenging conditions will only compound as we move into higher demand over the summer months. The integrated approach, the Drought Task Force, is essential because when you look at the state agencies represented here, we have really unique expertise and authority over broad impacts of the drought. So I'm just really grateful to have everyone here. Last time around in 2020, I was able to, participate in some of the work groups. Also, I participated and went on the Northwest tour of drought. I thought that went really well, and a lot of statewide leaders joined us for that. And then, given that this spans almost every aspect of the DNR, I'd also like to propose the task force discussion on potentially looking at another potential subcommittee, or definitely a topic on looking at wildfire risks, and possibly having like a work group beginning to address some of the imminent threat posed by wildfires. This group could focus proactively on examining the risks, assessing potential regional and statewide impact, existing resources, support. We could bring in Division of Fire Prevention and Control, and then some of our other federal partners at the Bureau of Land Management and U.S. Forest Service. But I'm just so grateful to be here. I'm going to do my best to participate in the meetings, and look forward to collaborating with everyone here.
Thanks so much, Dan. Lauren, I'll have you go from CWCB.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Kat, for all of the work that went into putting this together. Given that Kat and team are on the CWCB, I'm not going to take a whole lot of time, but just to summarize kind of where CWCB, I think, fits into this as far as resources go. We have a variety of funding programs through the CWCB that can be helpful. However, they're not really intended to respond to disasters, unfortunately, and that includes drought. But I did want to mention that we have our Water Plan Grant Program, which funds a variety of different multi-beneficial water projects around the state that can include supporting water efficiency and drought planning efforts, including pretty large-scale conservation projects and innovative agricultural water resiliency projects, or projects that implement recommendations from our wildfire-ready watersheds, all of which certainly relate to the challenges we're seeing today. We also have our CWCB Water Supply Reserve Fund Grant Program, which is our kind of more basin level grant program that also can fund a variety of different planning and resiliency type efforts. And then perhaps most related to this, we do have an agricultural emergency drought response program. I do want to caveat that we only have $1 million available annually when there's a formal drought declaration made. And it's meant to provide grant funding to agricultural organizations like ditch companies or reservoir companies or conservation districts to secure temporary water supplies during declared drought emergencies. Applications are due April 15th to help offset costs from the previous water year. So I wanted to mention these funding resources, knowing that they're not directly responsive to emergencies that we might see this coming water year. However, I think they're important for just the overall planning efforts. I just want to echo Dan's comments, that we're committed to providing all of our expertise and resources towards this issue ahead of us. In my mind, a big part of that is just in gathering all of the information and resources. And Kat, I don't want to jump the gun here, but part of what we're working on at the DNR and through CWCB is putting together a webpage that would kind of be a one-stop shop for all of this information. And so I think hopefully as we go around and report out, we can collect some of the resources that are mentioned as part of this call and use that as a starting point for that web page that we might start pointing people towards. And then also just another echo for moving a conversation forward related to ad hoc working groups, both for Dan's suggestion, wildfire risk, and also an ag ad hoc work group, and then a municipal water supply working group, knowing that staff time and resources might be a little stretched, but to the extent that we could convene those groups, I think that might be a nice step forward.
Thank you, Lauren. CPW. Matt.
Yes, thanks, Kat. Yeah, CPW obviously new to the task force, but not new to responding to drought, but obviously unprecedented conditions this year. But I want to share a few things that CPW is working on while trying to continue to meet our mission while responding to drought. So CPW aquatic biologists are closely monitoring stream gauges, water temperature, and fish health to determine when voluntary or even mandatory fishing closures are warranted. Our aquatic biologists work closely with fishing guides and angling groups to communicate closures. Additionally, CPW biologists are identifying critical native and sport fish populations and monitoring for fish passage obstructions caused by infrastructure and or low flow, where there are low or drying rivers and lakes, and they may enact public fish salvages or even move fish that become stranded in pools. And speaking of fire, biologists are also monitoring fire activity and may consider rescuing genetically important fish from the wild by taking them to a hatchery isolation facility or to unoccupied water. On the hatchery side are 19 fish hatcheries, and our biologists work closely together to alter timing or cease fish stocking as conditions warrant. They're also monitoring the water supplies at the hatcheries and adjusting production goals as necessary. On a positive note, several hatcheries are stocking earlier and more fish right now, so conditions are actually excellent for angling right now. On the water quality team and regional and park staff are monitoring algae blooms and identifying toxic algae issues and issuing warnings when necessary. And other water quality considerations during drought that our staff are monitoring include heavy metals and also responding to fish kills that are caused by environmental conditions. CPW is also anticipating a shorter than normal motorized boating season. And so we're focusing on early season engagement and safety education to manage the transition from motorized to non-motorized use if the drought persists throughout the summer. CPW is able to negotiate an early opening of the boat ramp at Lake Granby to give anglers some early access there for fishing. We're also maintaining strict ANS inspections. That remains a top priority, obviously, for us, especially during drought. And our team is also in close communication with the Forest Service for firefighting incident command in regards to fire-related equipment inspections, especially scooper planes and source water supplies. On the terrestrial side, CPW staff are assembling spatial information on critical habitat for certain at-risk species with incidental management teams in the event of significant wildfires. CPW staff are also coordinating with CWCB to identify resources for post-fire habitat restoration. Staff will also be initiating implementation of the Beaver Conservation and Management Strategy in 2026, which includes multiple habitat restoration and beaver establishment activities that will encourage growth in beaver distribution and wetland development, which obviously helps with drought and post-fire. On a positive note, 3 consecutive mild winters have allowed wide distribution of big game animals across their winter range, rather than being concentrated in small areas during severe winters. So generally, habitat conditions on the winter range are good. In conclusion, CPW staff are working hard to protect wildlife resources and habitat while continuing to provide world-class recreation opportunities that we all enjoy here. I'll stop there.
Thanks a lot, Matt. I'll turn it over to Division of Water Resources and Jason Ullman.
Thank you, Kat. Good afternoon. So as state engineer, I lead the Division of Water Resources, which includes nearly 300 staff across the state in 7 water divisions in each of the major river basins in the state of Colorado. DWR is responsible for distributing water among water users in accordance with Colorado law and our interstate compacts. The prior appropriation system of water rights was adopted by the drafters of Colorado's Constitution because they recognized that Colorado is a semi-arid state where water supply is many times not adequate to supply all those who want to use it. This year is going to be an extreme example of that. But that system is clear. Water is allocated based on seniority. When there's not enough water for everyone, junior water users cannot divert. Water users have various legal options to ensure supply for critical uses that might include reliance on storage, exchanges, augmentation plans, or administratively approved things like substitute water supply plans. In general, experienced water users are familiar with the ebb and flow of dry and wet years. They watch snowpack as it evolves. They consider forecasts and plan accordingly, and are used to working with DWR staff to address issues in particularly in dry years. I mean, on a positive note, we've been through dry years before, and the system in many cases is set up to handle dry years. Unfortunately, this is going to be historically dry. Colorado's largest water users are ag producers, and they make plans in the winter and spring based on those evolving conditions. Some are already choosing not to plant certain fields this year. We've already been in coordination with the federal crop insurance program to provide data that they need to support any claims that producers might have. I think it's maybe somebody else made this comment. Some users without storage are probably going to feel the most pain in this year, with the record high temperatures in March and the early runoff, where we've seen streams actually peak close to 2 months earlier than normal. That runoff occurred before they could use the water. And so if they don't have storage, that's going to be a bigger impact to them. Large municipal water providers plan for dry years, and most are implementing drought plans, or many are implementing drought plans by limiting outdoor use right now that you may have heard of. As you've already heard from Russ Schumacher and others, 2026 is poised to be historically dry, with less supply statewide than ever before. Our staff around the state are seeing, as I mentioned, a remarkably early runoff. The peak has occurred on many streams already. In fact, on some streams, I've heard recently from staff that are watching these gauges that usually when snow is running off, you see a diurnal fluctuation, which means that you see an up and down in the flow regime, because in the daytime when it's hot, it melts a lot of the snow. The stream goes up at a later time and then drops back down. Some of that diurnal fluctuation is already gone, meaning that the snow is already effectively melted out. So I guess senior water users and those who operate under approved augmentation plans will be able to legally divert. However, supplies for replacement plans will be strained this year as well, with some supplies having the lowest amounts available on record. And one example is the historic user pool in Green Mountain Reservoir, which recent forecasts have indicated will be short of filling by a significant amount, tens of thousands of acre feet. resulting in call length that's likely to be longer than ever before as well. So what's going on right now or up to this date? We've already spoken to many different users about an emergency substitute water supply plans. We've approved and processed 5 of those so far based upon a need for health and safety. We are also considering some other non-emergency substitute water supply plan requests from users that are related to the drought that effectively allow them to use alternative supplies to keep their senior water users whole and allow junior user to continue to divert. And I want to stress that we are coordinating across DWR's offices in all the 7 different river basins with the Attorney General's office and others to be prepared to issue curtailments if we need to, as appropriate, to address issues that might arise that we haven't frankly dealt with before because of the potentially historic length of the call period. But more importantly, that we are committed to working with water users across the state to mitigate and reduce impacts to the extent that we can within the authority that I have as state engineer. And then I guess last, I just need to make the comment that in terms of our interstate compacts, Colorado will continue to administer water to ensure that we continue to meet our obligations to downstream states under our many interstate agreements. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And now I would like to turn it over to Dola.
Yeah, so the Department of Local Affairs, our strength and what we bring to this task force is really that nexus with the local governments. And we have a lot of different resources that we offer year-round to support really good planning and community development work. So I'll highlight a few. I'm the director of the Colorado Resiliency Office, so we have a whole suite of resources to help communities be adaptive and to whatever disruptions and this drought as well as wildfire and all those cascading impacts are a prime example of how important it is to build that adaptive capacity and plan. So we're here to do that. And then the Division of Local Government has our 8 regional managers that have their hand on the pulse of kind of what the local government challenges and issues are. What we're hearing, obviously, is, they are having to do more water planning, and there's a new requirement to implement a water supply element of their comprehensive plan. So we team with the CWCB, obviously, on a lot of good land use and water planning technical assistance to local governments, and have a staff person dedicated to that work. So providing that technical assistance. We also offer grants for community development, for planning, community development, like implementation projects. Some of them are water, wastewater treatment facilities. So wherever we can integrate innovative water conservation practices, we want to accelerate that. So that's just a quick overview of some of the resources that we have at DOLA. So, what you've been reading, we've been reading the paper, so this isn't anything new, but obviously water restrictions are starting to be implemented, some mandatory, some voluntary. And there's also, we're hearing, this is obvious as well, but impacts to local economies, drought and impacts in rural resort communities rely on skiing, et cetera. So there's, and the ag. So obviously big concerns about how do you get ahead of that. Region 9 in Southwest Colorado is regionally putting together and really proactively talking about what they can be doing to be nimble around drought and wildfire. So we're working to support that kind of regional action and preparedness. So I think just in summary, given the time here, I agree that proactive communications, guidance on, and kind of regional solutions are areas I'm interested in talking more about. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Anne. And then last, the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. So Chris.
Thank you. And I know we're running a few minutes behind, so I'll try to buy us a little bit back. At this particular phase, one of the things that we can do is help be an information gathering source as well as collating. And a portion of that is our field team. There are 10 of them that work on a daily basis with local emergency managers and agencies. They've already started reporting up. In fact, in the last 30 minutes, just received a report that Eagle County is activating their local EOC to monitor drought impacts and restrictions. Excuse me. That information is coordinated by the state EOC. We'll keep those records. We also do some dissemination. For example, we have morning briefings every Thursday morning. We report out on drought conditions. We've been doing that for many years. We also report out on any designations of interest. For example, the USDA designation that came out Monday for 33 counties. So that goes out to a statewide audience. We also facilitate executive orders, and if we get to a later stage, that is one thing that we can certainly do. Sometimes those come with funding, other times they are for waivers, particularly transportation. Back in 2018 and 2020, we did some waivers for hours of service and size of loads for hauling hay to producers, and we're happy to assist in any regard in that particular capacity. If you also need assistance, the state EOC can do research, gather information, put you in contact with people. We do that on a regular basis. As long as there's no cost, we will do the legwork and get the information back to you. Our public information officer is synced up with CWCB to amplify any messages coming out. And last item I'll mention is the Natural Disaster Hazard Mitigation Enterprise. We're looking at doing some drought mitigation projects with the Department of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for keeping us as much on track with time as we could. Emily, would you mind sharing those slides again so we can briefly touch on next steps?
Yep, 1 second.
Thank you. And you just pop to the next slide. Based on today's discussion, what I heard from the group was the interest in a wildfire ad hoc working group, potentially an agricultural impact or municipal impact ad hoc working group, developing funding and resource consolidation, potentially via a website. I think proactive communication guidance on regional solutions and information gathering. I think these are all things that we can move forward with. I'd like to ask the group, 3 ad hoc working groups is certainly kind of a lot of resource capacity to start right away. So I'd like to see if we could prioritize. Is there one that we would like to see move forward first, and we can begin developing lists of who might be on those ad hoc working groups from there. I heard wildfire a couple times, so I'm going to suggest maybe that is one that we initiate sooner than later. Can I get a show of hands if that is something you all support? Okay, great. And then I think we can also very easily begin funding and resource consolidation via a website. And I don't know that we necessarily even need a vote on that. I'd like to know if the agricultural impacts ad hoc working group would be like something that you'd like us to initiate right away as well. Show of hands, please. I see you, Robert. All right, thank you. Okay, I will, and municipal, we already have some lists developed based on the previous activation, so we can get these all moving and bring back some information to you all at the next task force meeting. I do want to highlight the Water Conditions Monitoring Committee's meeting dates below, and you can all see these here. Please tune into those. They're very informative. And then I'm going to suggest that we look at a monthly calendar hold for this group. If monthly isn't needed down the road, we can always shift that. But I think just in light of the conditions changing rapidly and the need to get resources mobilized, I think that we'll look at a monthly hold going forward. And I wanted to share the idea to have some subsequent funding and resource sharing from the USDA. They reached out to us earlier this week and wanted to share some resources. So I think that would be a really good resource for this group as well. With that, I know we're at time, so I'm going to wrap it up really quick. Thank you all for your time today, and look out for some future dates for task force meetings going forward. And knowing that we didn't have any public comments, I'm gonna we can breeze through